Radio check. Loud and clear.
KSL Sports and KSL Podcast present Mode Push, an American view of F1, starting now.
I'm stuck. He's making cut with his honestly.
I'm gutted. I'm absolutely gutted.
I enjoyed this so much. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, everybody, welcome on in. It's another edition of Mode Push, an American view of F1. Alex, Kirry, Dan, Jimenez joining you again. And look, it's been a while. Boy, the cussing Max Verstappen, when things aren't going his way, you forget that's what he sounds like every week when he's pissed off. And so now the open to the show sounds a little bit more of like what we've been getting the last little while. What a weird time that we've been living in. And, in my regular day job and your regular job, we find ourselves a little bit busier this time of year, but not too busy to get together and break down the Italian Grand Prix. F1 has gotten exciting again, Dan. We are like at a point now where we toss two coins. You don't know who's going to win weekend to weekend now, which is the way we wanted it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like just pinch yourself because right now we're in a race fan's dream scenario because you just don't know what's we're going into Baku. I'm so excited because you have no clue who's going to win. And that's like how we like it. And it's just going to create for a great drama this weekend and the rest of the season. And I think even both championships are on the line right now.
So you do think that Max could get run down for the Drivers' Championship if he doesn't mind his P's and Q's? I mean, like the deal is like he's still racing pretty darn hard. It feels like the best he can kind of do is that fifth or sixth place. I don't really get it. I don't know why such the big change because it's not just McLaren that's figured it out. Ferrari's figuring it out, obviously with Charles with the win at Monza. But I don't know. I mean, like it could be McLaren, it could be Ferrari, it could be freaking Mercedes even who've like found themselves. I think about multiple race winners from multiple teams this year. It's crazy.
Yeah, we've had 9 race winners this year, which has to be the most in a very, very long time. I haven't looked up the stat. And we could get 10 this weekend. Baku, Sergio's the only 2-time winner of Baku, so he's really good there. The car right now, which is obvious, is not great, so that's probably what's holding him back. But it's not out of the question. I think the Constructors' Championship, Mercedes or McLaren has. It's theirs to lose at this point. They're now within, single-digit points of Red Bull, and I fully expect them to overtake them this weekend and never look back. On the driver's side, mathematically still possible. Even if Max were to finish second every race and Lando first every race, Lando would still catch him.
Wow.
But McLaren's got to get their act together on if they really want to make that a priority or not, because right now they're letting them race and Oscar is taking points away from Lando when Lando has a very realistic shot at the championship. And that's a whole nother thing we could get into.
Well, let's talk about it because obviously Italy was a little bit of a strange race because you felt like, all right, Oscar, first of all, at that, what was it, turn 2, I think it was, or maybe it was turn 3, but an aggressive move at the very beginning where you're already kind of looking at it going, oh boy, like what's going on here? Team orders is a term you hear a lot, when we're listening to these F1 races. And some teams have them where it's like, we are not going to race one another. We are not going to do X, Y, and Z. Other ones don't have team orders. They just say, go out there and race and beat each other. But from a mathematical standpoint, obviously delivering the Drivers' Championship and the Team Championship, that's a massive thing. Now, the team won. The Constructors' title obviously brings, tens millions more dollars each, place you go up in that order. And if you're the winner of the Constructors' title, you're talking about $100 million that you're going to add. So you have to prioritize being able to get it done. You can't have a DNF because if that's Alpine, they're running into each other in their races. Their race weekends are over. But you run that risk, right? I mean, so how do you balance the team versus the Constructors' title? And do you feel like that there should be a priority there and they need to say, hey, Lando's got the chance to do this. And I know technically, I think numbers-wise, Oscar could also be the champion, but it's a little bit more of a stretch to imagine that. So what do you do if you're McLaren?
And if I'm Zach Brown, I see why this is a super hard decision, because this might be the best chance you get in a long time at a drivers' championship, which is still very important to the team. The constructors, sure, obviously super important, but driver championship brings a lot of pride as well. And Lando, for the longest time, they said, Lando is a future Formula One champion, and now he has a real chance at it. But Oscar is incredible. And there's lots of reports coming out this week of, internal, thinkings at McLaren that they believe Oscar is the more likely future champion than Lando. So they're not ready to say, all right, Lando's the number one, Oscar's the number two in the team orders, because next year out of the gate, you might find that Oscar continues on this pace that he has had over the summer, and he's the clear champion favorite next year. And you don't want to take him off this year too soon. So I can see why it's a super hard decision, but it does seem like McLaren is very hesitant to put Lando ahead of Oscar in any strategic way. And if I'm Lando, I could see I'm very frustrated. I have 40 some odd points ahead of him. He realistically has no chance of winning this championship. We're going to get the constructors one regardless. So you got to tell Oscar to back off a little bit. I mean, that was an incredible move. We love seeing it. We love seeing the racing, and Oscar pulled off maybe one of the passes of the year there going into turn 3. And what they can't do is wreck each other. That's absolutely thing that they just cannot withstand and still hope to beat Red Bull. But I think that if I'm Zach Brown, you say, all right, we're halfway through the year. The strategy has to be set. We have to optimize for Lando and Oscar next year, clean slate, starting off again in March. And, we'll fight to the midpoint of the season and see if there's one driver that's clearly breaking away. But for this year, it's been decided. And when push comes to shove and we have to make a decision, we're going to optimize for Lando's race. That's what I would do if I were him, but I'm not him. And I understand why they make the big bucks to make these calls.
Okay, let's talk about some of the other developments in F1 since we've last chatted. We blinked, and Logan Sargent, we hardly knew ye. Enter Colapinto, who is an Argentine driver for Williams. Is he going to be their option for next year too, or is this just a gap filler for right now?
Gap filler till Carlos Sainz starts next year.
Oh, that's right.
It's very interesting. It's, what do you gain out of getting someone like that instead of Logan? I saw a report that his backers are paying Williams like $4.5 million over the rest of the season. So like $500,000 a race to put him in that seat. So Williams is making some money off of it. I don't believe that Logan Sargent was paying for his seat. So they're getting some money to offset it. But it is still really strange that they didn't go with somebody like Mick Schumacher, for example, that is in the Mercedes, driver bullpen that they're still trying to evaluate. And you go with somebody, to Colapinto's credit, I think he did very well in his first race and got a better result out of the car than I think Logan would have. So, it's just an interesting choice. Maybe it must have been only money motivated, but you think there would have been enough people backing Mick to have made the same, the same offer. And the big thing for me was when they grilled James Vowles on this in the press conferences leading up to the race. He said something like, it doesn't make sense to go with a driver that isn't special, and Mick's not special. And everyone was like, wait, what do you mean Mick's not special? That's a strange thing to say. And he had to walk it back an hour later.
Well, then it was in the same press conference nobody was safe in that one, because he was like, Logan Sargent, yeah, he's done everything he can in the sport. There's nothing else he could do anymore in this sport. This is as far as he could ever get. You're like, whoa. Yeah. Everybody's getting hammered by this dude.
Yeah, it was a rough one. I mean, he speaks the truth.
Yeah,
he's saying the quiet part loudly.
Yeah,
but I thought that was, he's not making friends with Toto, I think, when he says Mick isn't special. Interesting.
Here's the other interesting thing, a development that, of course, and we've been wondering back and forth where it was going to be. I think a couple of weeks ago you actually said, I bet that he ends up going to Aston Martin, and Adrian Newey, officially as of yesterday, is going to be an Aston Martin man and designing the all of the technical things and reporting straight to Lawrence Stroll, I think is what the idea is. So he's going to make, I think that the terms that I heard on this, are you ready for this? I mean, he's not even the technical director. He's just a
head of aerodynamics or something. I think.
Yeah, I mean, he's not the team boss by any means, but he's being paid like he's a driver. I mean, they say that it's likely about a $20 million a year deal on top of Lawrence Stroll did the smart thing and gave him some shares at Aston Martin. Mm-hmm. And so they brought him in and they won the the lottery with Adrian Newey that everybody was trying to get. At some point, people were thinking he was going to end up in Maranello. Some people thinking he was going to end up staying at Red Bull, and then that was like totally gone. And then we were just wondering where he was going to end up, and Aston Martin ended up winning that race and throwing enough money at him. How quickly until he can turn even Aston Martin around?
Yeah, it comes at a very interesting time because he won't be able to start until next spring,
right?
But that'll be great timing for developing the 2026 car. And, the 2026 car it's a lot of engine and powertrain stuff, which won't really be his area. But I think that people are underestimating how much aero development is going to need to happen. The cars are going to be smaller. They're going to have different wing elements. And then there's this X mode, Z mode, low drag, high downforce stuff that is a completely, something we've never done in the sport. And, who better than Adrian Newey to think through the extra dimensions of complication that having two different aerodynamic profiles on a car creates. He's, credited for having figured out with the current car and these 2022 regulations, how the DRS can effectively create stall out and, do all these funny, tricky things when the flap is open that no other teams figured out before Red Bull. So I think he's just primed to, I bet in 2026, 2027, we're seeing a very performant Aston Martin car if they can get their power plant figured out, which they're going to be inheriting that Honda powertrain relationship from Red Bull. So I think that's probably going to be in a good spot, but we're probably looking at it Adrian Newey's done it again. He figured out some sort of trick under this new era of regulations. And I think he'll have the lead time leading up to it, starting next spring, let's call it 10 months before cars hit the track, to have a real influence on the development of the car.
It's going to be interesting because we saw when the newest regulations came up, you saw a massive gap, right? Not only the massive gap that was between Red Bull and everybody else, but you also saw a massive gap from what Mercedes thought was going to be happening versus what actually started to happen to the car. And then a bunch of other teams trying to figure it out along the way. We had, the 9 months of porpoising talk, as soon as everything kind of went down. And so I guess, from what I've understood, not being a student of F1 for that long, Adrian Newey just shows up and wins every place that he goes.
Yeah. He's developed pretty much every championship car for the last 20, 2.5 decades, except for the Mercedes, run that they had for 7 years. But everything else he's been a part of. He's undoubtedly the greatest car designer of all time.
Wow.
And he's very much still in his prime in sharp. So I just love how, what's the word? Just of much of a baller Lawrence Stroll is, or how committed he is to making his son a world champion.
That's all we need is that guy winning another bidding war, right? You think about the stuff in his life he just assumes is his anyway, and it was another one. Oh, I want to get me the best designer in the history of F1. There's that part of me, too, that goes, man, I hope that Fernando Alonso is in that seat still when things start to turn around. And I mean, it's not that they just took a weird step backward this year. It was kind of strange because they were developing so well last year and they had so much success last year. And at this point, Fernando Alonso had, triple-digit points and podiums and things like that. And so I do hope that whatever success they have, old man Nando is still part of that conversation. I don't know if that's going to be the case. I don't know how much longer he's got. You just don't see a lot of 40 plus drivers in these F1 seats.
Yeah, he's I think 42 now. He'll be 44 when he finally sits in an Adrian Newey designed car. Uh, I mean, we'll see. I hope I'm with you. I would love to see him ride that success. But if he doesn't, if he retires, it'll be interesting to see who they choose to replace him with, because it's always a benchmark for Lance, and you don't want somebody who completely puts Lance to shame. You want him competitive, and yeah, Adrian Newey's not the only, he's the biggest named hire that they've made, but there have been some other major hires in the last year that are going to be starting next year that are coming over from Red Bull and Ferrari in very very senior technical positions. So Lawrence he's shelling out for the best talent that is available in the garage, and hopefully, or we'll see if they can bring it all together for a competitive car in 2026.
Let's talk about Baku this weekend, and how are we supposed to feel about this race? It's one of those where it's a very quick track. I was looking at I think one of the fastest times ever recorded in F1 was during a practice round, or maybe it was during qualifying. Valtteri Bottas hit 368 kilometers per hour in that Mercedes back in 2018. This is a quick track. It's also relatively hot, and so what are we expecting on a race weekend in Baku?
I love Baku. I think this is going to be a great race. It sets up a lot like Monza. You got that it's the longest stretch, I think, or maybe the Las Vegas backstretch is now longer, but one of those two are the longest stretch in F1. So a lot of low downforce stuff, and then the tight, tricky middle section through the city can create a lot of drama, we've seen in the past. So it's anybody's race. Honestly, the top 4 teams, any 4 of them could win this weekend, and they all know it. And I think the stakes are going to be high. And is it a sprint race?
No,
I feel like
I was just looking at that. No, it wasn't this year. At the very least, they just have like a regular. It just apparently. I feel
like last year it was a sprint race because that's when George put Max into the wall during the sprint race.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So so we'll have regular qualifying, but no, I think I would look to see can Charles repeat from last. They were fast. Obviously, it was the one-stop strategy that did it all, but they're able to make those tires last. I think everyone is thinking this is a one-stop race because we now have 2 race winners. I mean, George's was kind of pulled. He lost his race win, but we have 2 race winners that just caught everyone off guard with a one-stop strategy and have made it work. And I got to think, if I'm a race engineer, I'm starting to change my assumptions around what the pace fall off is on these hard tires in races like this that are a little bit lower downforce. I think the strategy will be, like you said, it's going to be hot, so that's hard on tires too, but it's anybody's race. And man, Lando, you got to pull it together, man. If you start on pole, you have to be leading at the end of lap 1. McLaren, you got to make the call and say there's a team order, and you got to get the show on the road, because there's like 8 races left. If Max has if he keeps finishing 5th, 6th, and Lando can get a couple wins, that lead will eat away very quickly. But if it's still 8 points, 7 points here and there, it's going to come down to the very last race.
All right, so one of the other things some of the other developments that are out there, Kevin Magnussen, of course, for Haas, not going to be racing because it's just like, look, F1 racing is just like being on the regular road. He had his license suspended. You know what's going on? So he's going to miss a race and too many penalty points. And Ollie Behrman, we get to see him for the second time this year.
Yeah, that's going to be great. I think he did great in Saudi Arabia earlier this year.
6 points, I think he scored, or maybe it was, This
is a great opportunity for him. And, if you're K-Mag, I guess, whatever, you've got how many 8 races left in your F1 career. So I think that it'll be great to see how Ollie Behrman does in that. And, we've got Colapinto, who's new. We got confirmed that Kimi Antonelli is going to be starting, or he's going to be joining Mercedes next year. I think that's news that we haven't covered yet. So a lot of young talent makes it exciting.
So yes, Mercedes seats. I saw some confusion about because they obviously want Kimi Antonelli, and that's their future, at least in their minds. And Toto gets guys in his head, and those are going to be his guys, and one of those guys is also George. So, like, where does that leave the future for George at Mercedes? Is it going to be a George Kimmy, 1-2 seat there at Mercedes for the foreseeable future, or do you see possibly maybe even George being put in another place in the future?
I think that there's still this possibility that that Toto goes out and gets Max. Like, could he steal Max? And he would kick George to the curb, I think, pretty quickly, as if Max was on board with it.
Could you imagine, though, a team? Yeah. Could you imagine, though, a team where Jos Verstappen and Toto have to walk next to each other in the garage? I guess Jos Verstappen and anybody, but the fact that, like, you have a look, we all have seen this in sports, right, in youth, where it's like there's that sideline dad that nobody wants to interact with. That's Jos Verstappen. You just have to put up with him because his kid's the superstar player on the team.
Yeah. The biggest egos in the world, spend their weekends in Formula One garages and paddocks. It's incredible. But I think, Antonelli, talk about like an awkward PR moment. It was obviously they had it all set up to make the big announcement that Antonelli's taking that seat after his practice appearance in Italy, and he bends it on his second lap, and not just bad, but like wrecks the car.
Yeah.
So that made it super awkward. But I mean, but he was fast for one lap. I have to chuckle too, because they're like, well, he was so fast. He was so fast that the tires couldn't hold, and like there was so much spin coming out of the Mercedes like PR machine after that wreck in practice.
Oh yeah.
That like, the engineers looked at the data and they just said he was so fast. It's like, well, duh. Like, that's what happens when you go into a corner too fast.
You don't put the brakes on.
Step out,
yeah,
and you're gonna wreck the car. It's not that he was skilled; it's that he went in too fast. Yeah. He was trying too hard. Anyway,
that's how you get a ticket. When you're speeding and then you wreck in the snow, and then the officer goes, "Yeah, that's too fast for the conditions." It's like he's not complimenting you on how fast you are. Man, you're really fast in the snow. It's like,
it's the tires' fault.
Sure. All right. Give me your predicted podium and your dream podium for this weekend.
Gosh, I don't even know what a dream podium is anymore because it's all so random. I think that the predicted podium, I think Lando pulls it off. I think Lando finally gets his together in McLaren. I go Lando, Oscar, Charles.
So no Red Bulls in that on that podium.
I think Red Bull is clearly like a 5th, 6th place car right now.
Ooh. Yeah, but you know what? There's only one multiple winner at Azerbaijan in this whole field. Guess who it is? Checo Perez. Let's go.
The Checo factor.
Yeah.
Maybe that's my dream. Yeah, let's say my dream podium is a Checo win.
So like a Checo, Ollie Behrman, Nico Hulkenberg.
Yeah,
that's gonna be my. We'll have the same dream podium there. I'm gonna say that Max still puts it together, but I don't think he wins. I think it's gonna go Lando, Max, Oscar is gonna be your 1, 2, 3. I think the other teams get him out of here. Ferrari will just go right back to you know how this is. They have a successful weekend, then we don't hear from them again for another 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, they'll mess up the strategy and pit Charles 4 times.
Sure. Oh my goodness. This is what we dreamed for. Dan, we've been like hoping that there would be some competitiveness, and it came earlier than we thought it would. With 8 or 10 races left, it started to get more interesting, and here we are. I would have never dreamed. It's not just, like I said, it's not just McLaren. There's like 4 or 5 teams that are out there that are ready to knock each other off of the board. I love it.
And it's going to only be closer next year. 2025 is setting up to be one of the best years, and then we'll do the regulation changes, and I'm sure we'll start the whole cycle over again in 2026.
I cannot wait. All right. Dan, let's put a bow on it. We'll get this thing wrapped up, and we will be back again next week. What do you say? We get back together, we break down this race, and we'll get back into the swing of doing the last few episodes of the last few races of the season here before we crown Lando champion at the end of the season. Sound good?
Can't wait.
All right. Great. Dan Jimenez, Alex Kirry will be back again next week on another edition of Mode Push, an American View on F1. For Dan, I'm Alex. We'll see you then, everybody.